Hello, I wanted to go over a couple examples of solving for absolute values so that you had them here on video. So the first one we're going to do is negative 2x plus 7. That's inside the absolute value, and that equals 25. So the idea of this is you've got to think inside the absolute value. So if I got, let's say I just took this answer and I solved it, and I got the absolute value of 25. Well, the absolute value of 25 is the distance from 0, so that is just 25. So the absolute value of 25 is 25, and so that equals 25. So if the inside equaled 25, this would be true. But there's something else we have to think about. We have to think the other direction because absolute value is the distance. And so if the inside equaled the negative 25, so if this equaled negative 25, well, the absolute value of negative 25 is also a positive 25. And so this would still be true. So with absolute value, when you're solving for absolute value, you have to think about both sides. Could it be the positive that stayed positive? Or could it be a negative, but then the absolute value of a negative is a positive? So when solving these, you have to set up two cases. So step one is to make sure that the absolute value is by itself on one side, meaning there's nothing attached to it. There's no multiplication over here. There's no extra numbers on the outside. So in this case, it is. It is set up where the absolute value is by itself. So step one is good. Step two is to set up the two cases. So the first case is going to be, well, if the inside equaled a positive 25, it would be true. That's the first case. The second case says, well, what if the inside equaled a negative 25? Well, if the inside equaled a negative 25, then the absolute value of that would still be positive. And so we have two cases here. And so we have to solve for both. And so the first one, let's solve for the pink one first. Okay, and we're going to just solve for x. So we're going to subtract 7 from both sides. And so we're left with negative 2x. And this is a positive 25. And then we're subtracting 7. Okay. Okay, so we get a positive 18. Now, to isolate x, we're going to divide both sides by negative 2. And so we're left with x is equal to negative 9. Okay, we're going to save this for a minute. We're going to have to double check it to make sure it works, but we're going to save it for a minute, and we're going to go ahead and do the green case now. So the green case has this negative 25, because if it was absolute value, it would still become positive. So let's try this one out. So we're going to subtract 7 from both sides. So we get negative 32. And then we're going to divide both sides by negative 2. So x, we've got negative 32 divided by a negative 2. That's going to be a positive 16. So we're going to save that number as well. Okay, I'm going to now double check these into the original equation. So you take the answers, and before you change anything, just the way that the problem came, you're going to check them. So I'm going to rewrite them up here so that way I can erase. And we're going to double check them into the original. Okay, so if I plug in -9 for x. That's the first step. So 2, this is a -2, times a -9 plus 7. And so this is why we practiced order of operation last week. Because once we do this, we need to say, okay, the inside of the parentheses are first. So the inside of the absolute values are first. Within there, you need to multiply first, okay? So you get -9 times a -2. So a negative times a negative is going to be a positive. So we're going to get positive 18 plus 7. And so then 18 plus 7 is in fact 25. And then the absolute value of 25 is 25. And so the question is, does 25 equal 25? Well, yes. And so then that means -9 is in fact checked, and it's a answer. If for some reason we got something weird like 23 equals 25, well, that's not true. And so it would be a false statement. And so -9 would not be equal. Okay, and that's why we're double checking, because there's sometimes false ones that are called extraneous solutions. Okay, so now let's try the 16. So we're going to do -2, but now we're going to plug in 16 for x. Okay, so we get a negative times a positive. That gives me a -32 plus 7. That ends up giving me a -25. But the absolute value of a -25 is a positive 25. And so therefore, this also works. And so my two answers for x would be -9 and 16. All right, go to the next video if you want to see a harder one that does not work.